Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Regina Stone, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. Like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go all the way up to today, and then we want to talk about what you're doing with Stone Impact to change people's lives. Okay?
All right, awesome.
Well, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
So where were you born?
So I was born in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Yeah.
And so my mom was also a single mother of 6 kids.
Wow.
And my dad wasn't really around. He was usually in and out of prison. He was a drunk, so he wasn't around too much. One of my brothers passed away when he was 4, so there was 5 of us left who grew up together.
Sorry.
So it's okay. I mean, it's a part of life, right? It's made me who I am, so I appreciate it today. Go ahead.
Oh, it's okay. So you grew up in Knoxville?
I did.
Did you graduate high school there?
I never graduated. By the time I turned 16, my mom had signed me away over to what you would call, I guess, foster parents or guardians. I got in a lot of trouble as a kid. I was a troublemaker and had a very successful illegal business at that time. So I was already too grown and, for anybody, if you will. So they kicked me out after like 8 months of living there. And then I just moved out for my own after that. I was kicked out of school as well. So I just kind of said I was done with school and did not graduate. So
It's okay. So in Knoxville, growing up, what was your favorite thing about growing up there?
I would say that my favorite thing was definitely like being out in the woods and the lake. We would all go together to the lake and just swim all day, fish all day, be out in the woods, play in the woods. So it's just really beautiful out there. So it was very nice and peaceful when we were there, just not at home.
It's a beautiful part of the country. It really is.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
I didn't have a whole lot of great influences, and I would say the person, and it's probably pretty, I guess you could say sad, the person I looked up to the most when I was about 12, my mom finally purchased her first home. Before that, we lived either in the projects or the trailer park. And she finally bought her first house when I was around 12. And one of our neighbors, I grew really close with one of the young girls who lived down the street. And her dad was like this big time kind of, if you will, drug dealer. And so I kind of wanted to be like him. And I really looked up to him. And he was the first like father figure that I had in my life. And so I really kind of wanted to like appease to him. And I just really, I mean, it's crazy. That's how like low my self-esteem was and like where our environment and how it was. But I always really loved like his drive and his ability to take care of his family. I mean, he obviously wasn't the greatest person alive, but for me, he helped to take care of me. He would let me work. And then obviously I started like doing work for him and things that he would try to do to like help me buy shoes and school clothes and things like that. So I really looked up to him as like the first man that was in my life that gave me a good outlook. And I kind of wanted to be like him, if that makes sense.
I got you. It makes sense.
Yeah.
So after you decide to leave school, did you stay in Knoxville?
I stayed in Knoxville. until I was 21. And then once I was 21, well, I'll reverse a little bit. So I got really bad addicted, obviously, to drugs. And so from about 14 to 21 was probably my darkest time. I found the needle at 18. And then once I got into that, the world just went really cold. So at
Mhm.
21, basically where I was just like, after almost 10 years of using, I was pretty done. And my life was obviously in shambles. So I ended up flying out here to California, and that's how I ended up out here. Is I came here for treatment for a rehab, and because we grew up really poor, when I first came out here, the treatment center I went to was like, you know what, 1,000 Steps Beach is in Laguna,
Mhm.
very nice area, obviously. And so I pull up to the house. It's right across from 1,000 Steps Beach, and
Mhm.
um, like a house I've never seen in my life, you know. And I was just like, wow, I don't know where I've landed, but
Mhm.
this is crazy. So yeah, just from there, then I ended up deciding to stay. And so I've been out here now almost 10 years.
So, what was it? How did you end up landing at that rehab facility? Was it something that was court ordered? Was it what
No,
happened?
it wasn't. It was more of like I had been like in and out of jail and in trouble and stuff, but that really is not what I guess was my bottom. It was more of like an emotional bottom because I was literally like trying to overdose. I was trying to die and I just couldn't. So every day I would just keep waking up and I was just like, okay, if I'm going to keep living, like I can't keep living like this. And I was just pretty done um at that time. And then so I remember because I'd been out of my mom's house since I was 16, and one night I went and stayed at her house, and I'd woken up and I was really sick, obviously, from drugs. Like I had been sweating and shaking and vomiting and all the things. And my mom, and I was kind of like, I'm done, but like I needed something
Mhm.
to help. And it was probably the first time my mom's ever really like really been there. And she was like, look, we need to find something that you can do. And so she wanted to try to get me in the methadone clinic because that's what my sister had been doing. Now I'm extremely grateful I didn't get in there. So when I went to the clinic, because I had been on and off, like on the run, if you will, because I was in trouble so much, I never carried an ID. I didn't have like any type of paperwork with me, just in case, obviously. So I had no idea where any of that was. So they wouldn't let me in the clinic because I didn't have an ID. And at this point, I'm like crying because I'm like, I'm so sick. Like, I just need to go and do something. And my mom was like, just go do what you need to do. I'll try to basically find something that you can do without an ID. Because I paid like $40 a month to be on her insurance because obviously I was under 26 at the time.
Mhm.
And so she starts sending me all these numbers. And all at this time, I had already like picked up. And so I was just kind of like, nah, I'm done. Like, I'm going to continue my life the way I'm doing it. And the last number she sent me said California next to it. And I just like double looked at it and I was like, okay, you can call these people. I don't know why. I guess because it said California. And so she called them and then they did accept my insurance and they said they would pay for the flights. And then they called me and they do like an assessment basically to see if you need detox, how severe it is. So obviously I need a detox and to be on close watch because I was a huge seizure risk. And so they called me at like 9 p.m. They booked my flight for 4 in the morning.
Hmm.
So give me any time to like change my mind.
Wow. That was
Uh,
fast.
yeah. So then that's kind of how everything spiraled from there.
That's wild. So night you call them at 9
PM.
and they
My
put you on a plane at 4.
4 in the morning. Yeah.
That's 7 hours.
Yeah. They do it that way because obviously, like, especially when dealing with addiction, you might want to get sober 1 minute, but
Yeah.
it's like because your brain is so wired to be a certain way for so long, you don't even know that what you do just naturally puts you back in the same place. So it's like once you make that decision, you know that like if you don't hop on it right then and there, and they knew that working in treatment, obviously, and probably having been through it, that if you don't respond quickly, then they're going to change their mind.
Yeah. Well, I bet they've got some stories to tell.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Unbelievable. So you go to you fly out here
Mhm.
They pick you up at the airport, I take it.
Yep.
You go to Laguna.
Mhm.
They put you in this house.
Yes.
What's it like? I mean, obviously, like you said, it's gorgeous and all that kind of thing. It's like heaven on earth. Laguna's beautiful, right?
Very.
Thousand Steps Beach is like, yeah, okay. So when you get there, what are you feeling?
Um, I was really nervous because I'd never really I first of all, it was my first time being on a plane, and
Oh,
because we're up poor, we never really like went out of state or traveled.
right.
So I was really nervous and I was also really sick because again, by the time I landed, everything had worn off. So I was sick and I was shaking and I didn't really know what to expect. Um, and so, they put you in a room, they ask you like 1,000 questions as you can't even sit still because you're dying on the edge.
Mhm.
And then obviously the doctor calls in medications and you do detox. So their detox is residential is what they call it. So it's in the house in Laguna. A
Mhm.
few other girls that are in the same room with me. So you kind of sleep on like a twin size bed
Mhm.
and you share a room between the girls. And then on the opposite side of the house is like where the guys sleep. So it was once I, could feel a little bit better and be back to normal, it was a good experience, I think, for me personally, because the way I grew up, I never like, how you feel like you're meant for more, but I could
Mhm.
never see a different way of living because I was never exposed to it. So then this was the first time where I could see like maybe there's a chance,
Mhm.
maybe I can live a life like this and it doesn't have to be the way it always has been.
Right.
So then I would like do things that I never like because I had used for so many years and at such a young age, I had no idea what I liked. I
Mhm.
didn't know what they would ask me questions like, what's your favorite movie? What's your favorite food? I'm like, I have no idea. Like, I never really explored life.
Mhm.
I grew up at a very young age, taking care of so many kids because my mom was never home. She worked 3 and 4 jobs. So I was the one who had to do the cooking and the cleaning and be responsible for all the kids. And so I grew up very quickly. So I really didn't have a childhood. And so it was like for the first time, like they're taking us down to the beach and I can jump in the waves and like have fun and try things that I've never tried. So it was a good experience as far as that. Obviously the withdrawal was extremely difficult because even after detox, so when I first flew out there, they had told me, okay, you're only going to do detox, which is about 14 days normally or more, depending. And then my plan was to fly back home. Well, then in the
Mhm.
middle of detox, they're like, actually, no, we won't fly you back until you complete intensive outpatient care. So you have to stay for another 30 days on top of your detox. So at first I was mad because I was like, well, that's not what I was told. But they were like, we're not going to pay for your flight home until you fully complete treatment, which
Mhm.
now I'm grateful for. But in the beginning, I was mad, because it was getting in the way of what I wanted to do. So after detox, then
How how was it getting in the way of what you wanted to do?
I would say because although I wanted to be sober, I didn't know how to
Mhm.
stay sober. So I think internally, like, even though, like, here in the frontal lobe, I wasn't thinking, oh, I want to go get high, right?
Mhm.
But I think subconsciously, that's what you want. So you want to
Yeah.
go normal
Yeah.
uh, and go back to the same things. And then obviously, if you go back to the same thing, you're going to end up doing the same things.
Yeah.
Um,
Same people, same environment, that kind
exactly.
of thing. Yeah.
And so they were like, okay, well, after detox, we're going to put you in intensive outpatient. So once I got to outpatient, I was still withdrawing. Like I had a really hard time sleeping, really bad anxiety, and just shaky still because I'd been using for so long and I would
Mhm.
Xanax and heroin. So it's like one of the worst withdrawals, if you will.
Yeah.
So it was hard to kind of adjust once I got out and completely wasn't on any of those types of medication. And then I moved into intensive outpatient where you're doing basically groups all day and you live in another house with girls and you get in the van a lot because you got to travel to go to your classes and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And I think about 20 days or so after that is where everything kind of clicked.
Mhm.
and where I was finally like, okay, I'm ready to take this serious, and I don't want to go back to the way I was, you know.
Right. In your detox,
Hmm.
you mentioned that they have the doctors prescribe medication for you. What are they giving you during detox? Because you're coming back. I'm hallucinating this though, but you're coming back. You're coming from Tennessee.
Hmm.
You're shaking. You're sweating. You're probably not able to concentrate that
Hmm.
well because your mind is like, where's the next fix, right? Where's the, you know what I mean? Um, so you're trying to get through that. What are they giving you that helps you get through all that?
So they give you Suboxone. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's something. There's Suboxone clinics, and then there's methadone clinics.
Hmm.
Methadone is a little more dangerous because it actually seeps into your bones, and it's the absolute worst withdrawal you could ever experience. But in my opinion, they make those clinics because it's basically a legal trap house. I mean, they get them on this drug and then move them to this drug. So
Right.
because it's legal, it's fine. But they don't teach them how to change their habits, right? To work on coping mechanisms, to go through their childhood and their traumas, where you can actually learn how to cope with life on life's terms. So it's kind of a band-aid. But anyway, so they put me on Suboxone to deal with the opioid withdrawal, and then because of the Xanax withdrawal, they put me on basically like Ativan, but they do a
Hmm.
dose because I was taking like 15 to 20 a day, so they're
Right.
not going to prescribe me that much, but just enough where I'm not going to have a seizure.
Right.
And then they put me on like buspirone, which is like an anxiety medication, and then Seroquel because I was obviously a little bit psycho, going up and down with my emotions. So those are like the main drugs that they
So it
put
just
me.
kind of smoothed you out,
Exactly.
kind of
Well,
put you on a more even keel so that you get through the next 14 days.
yeah, exactly. And have some like normal thought process and not be, wired crazy.
So you go through the 14 days, which I'm guessing was rough.
Yes.
Then they put you in this outpatient
Yes.
and it's intensive, right? Like they said, you go into outpatient and I'm guessing that you're just kind of hanging on by a thread,
Yes.
right? It's like every day is just, you're just kind of, you're putting one foot in front of the other,
Hmm.
but you're not sure why, right? You're kind of like, what am I doing? Am I
Yes.
guessing? Am I guessing correctly?
Yes, correct. Yeah,
So
that
when you get go ahead.
I was just saying that is exactly how it is.
When you get to the place, and again, this 20-day moment
Mhm.
where you decide, you know what, I want this.
Mhm.
I want to live better, right? I want to improve my life. I want to have, a life worth living, so to speak, right?
Mhm.
Talk about that moment for a second because there are a lot of people that are going to listen to this and
Mhm.
they're battling something like this.
Yeah.
And they're trying to get to that place mentally and emotionally. Can you talk about how you got there and then how you knew you were there?
Yeah, definitely. So there were some girls in my house that ended up getting some heroin. And so they used, and my plan was to use. And luckily, it worked out for me that we snuck out of the house. I honestly just wanted to get out of the house, anyways. And we went, I literally just played cards with one of the other guys that was there. And then one of the girls that had used had her boyfriend who lived in the same house, and she wanted to go see him because they were going to use together. So we snuck out of the house, and luckily, like, there wasn't enough. Like, she wasn't obviously going to share. And I still had a good time, like, just out playing cards, whatever. So we snuck out of the house, and then we come back. And I don't know how they found out we snuck out. It obviously was probably pretty obvious, but, at the time, you think you're slick and you're sneaky. We come back from the house, and obviously everyone gets tested, and they really were emphasizing on me because I kept passing the drug test, and they were like, we know you snuck out, like, we know you used. I was like, I actually didn't use. And so they kind of, and I told them, I was like, I did sneak out of the house, I went and played cards, but I didn't use drugs, I just snuck out of the house. And so they let me stay, but the other girls got kicked out.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my moment in realizing, like, if I don't get it together, I'm gonna be just like that, like
Yeah.
on the streets and continuing living the same life over and over. And that was kind of my moment, is like where I was like, by the grace of whatever you want to call it, God or whoever, like I'm still here and still alive, because I really shouldn't be alive. Like the
Yeah.
things I have been through and the way I used, like, were putting grown men around me. I knew that people were dying like flies,
Yeah.
like left and right. And I still just kept managing to live somehow. And so that was kind of my moment where I was like, all right, do I want to be like that? Do I want to continue this road, or do I want to take advantage of what's in front of me? Because it was an opportunity of a lifetime. And I always asked myself, like, why me? Like, how did I get out of this? Like, how did I end up here? And like, why? I mean, now I know why, but in the beginning, it was just like, I don't really understand why I was saved. And then I knew, I was like, if you're either going to keep getting saved and then ruin it, or you can take advantage of that and just kind of build your life from there. And then that's where I was like, okay, I got to do something, and some things have to change, or I'm just going to end up just like them.
Is it safe to say, and I'm asking, I'm not, I haven't come to a conclusion, but is it safe to say, well, let me ask you this. So you snuck out to go use. That was your intention, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you end up playing cards with one of the guys. You don't end up using because of some other things that are beyond your control.
Mm-hmm.
You end up coming back and you watch the people that snuck out with you, you watch them get kicked out.
Yep.
Is it possible, or you tell me, seeing that ramification, seeing that accountability being applied to them, did that kind of force your decision? Did that kind of force your hand? Like, did that clarify things for you?
Yeah, it did. It definitely clarified where I was like, that could have been me,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
had intention. My
Yeah.
intention was there.
Yeah.
You know, really, I should have been out just because I didn't physically use, like, the mind was there. Obviously, I
Yeah.
was tell them that, because once they kicked you out, you were done. I mean,
Yeah.
like, I'm in a whole nother state. I don't know anybody out here. I'm
Yeah.
2 miles away. And if I tell my mom I'm kicked out of treatment, for one, she doesn't have money like that anyways. But
Right.
number two, she's not going to fly me back. So I'm
Yeah. What are you going to do? Hitchhike? Right? You're sort of on an island.
exactly,
So the California thing probably altogether was
Mhm.
really a divine intervention kind of thing, right? That you ended up out here so far away that when you were confronted with the coincidence, if you will, or the punishment, so to speak, right, of
Mhm.
that particular behavior, it sort of forced your hand into.
Mhm.
Am I understanding correctly? Right?
Yep.
It sort of crystallized things for you, right? That there really are ramifications, and the ramifications in this case are pretty huge. And I don't know where those other people are from. Like
Mm.
they might have been from Orange County, right? And this might have, getting kicked out might have been party time. We're out of
Yeah.
here, right? For you, it was a different deal, like a
Yeah,
completely different deal.
it definitely was different, but yeah, I definitely needed it. Like, I'm so stubborn, and sometimes it's goes against the good, if you will. And I needed to be stripped 2,000 miles away, and I needed that structure, like,
Yeah.
where we tested several times a week on top of that, and we had to go to NA meetings and AA meetings, and like I had to be forced to do those things, because again, like, if there were any leakage, like, I know I would have, like,
Taking
you know
advantage of it.
same place. Like, had I been in Knoxville and went to a treatment center, I know everybody. Like, I could have
Yeah.
easily, restarted over again, and would have.
Yeah.
I didn't know any better. Like, that's all I knew was addiction. All my family uses. All my dad, like my uncles, my cousins, like everyone is drug addicts. The only person that didn't use was my mom, but her men. So, all I saw was that addictive over and over. It's like everyone's using, it's normal. I didn't really realize it wasn't normal. I thought everybody was on drugs.
Yeah.
And so to then, like, have to relearn how to live,
Mhm.
like, how do I socialize sober? How do I do anything sober? I never worked
Mhm.
for, I never like dealt with my problems sober. Like I didn't know how to cope with life, and so it's really rewiring your entire
Mhm.
brain of like, okay, all my old habits, like I literally have to change not one thing about me, but everything. And
Mhm.
that's like one big thing. And like they call it the rooms, like NA and AA is like, you're not going to change one thing, you're going to change everything. You're going to have to become a different person because the old person has that old habits and old ways and things you don't even realize. Like the moment you pick up the phone, like you're already getting into those steps to take you to using again, but you don't even like realize. And you have to then start trying to figure out ahead of time, is this going to get me back to the same place? If
Mhm.
I go here, like, is that going to trigger me and get me back into the same place if I talk to this person or if I, go through something tough, but then I isolate instead of like, leaning in on my network, like all these things that you just don't think about that if you're normal, you don't really have these issues. But I didn't know how to live, without drugs. Like, and it was
Right.
the thing I will say, besides building my business, that was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Like redoing my whole life and all you think about from the moment you wake up is getting high. Like even being in I mean, it probably took me a couple months where I would finally wake up and be like, oh, wow, I haven't thought about getting high all day. Like seeing someone's veins would trigger me. Going into the bathroom would trigger me because I would go into public bathrooms and use. Seeing the oven because I would cook drugs in the oven. Like all these little things that are so stupid.
Mhm.
It would literally just be like, oh my God, like I want that feeling again. And it was so hard to not feel that way
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
I
So
did.
so here's a question for you.
Mhm.
Going through everything that you went through, going to your mom, getting the list, calling the list, seeing California on there, right?
Mhm.
Never flying on a flight before, never going on an airplane before, right? 4 o'clock in the morning, you're on a plane, you're in withdrawals. You fly to Orange County, right? They pick you up at the airport, you're in withdrawals, you're shaking, you're sweating, you're just sick to your stomach, right? And they take you to their location and they get you what you need, right, in terms of medication and that kind of thing. You spend the next 14 days going through this detox, which I'm has got to be hell on earth.
Yes.
Then they put you in this intensive outpatient care,
Mhm.
right? And outpatient sounds like outpatient to me. It sounds like you're not inpatient, you're outpatient, right?
Yes.
So that sounds like to me that even though you've detoxed, you still don't have the skills to be out,
No.
right? So it's almost a test, right? So you're out of detox. They put you in this outpatient care, even though it's intensive, right? They put you in this outpatient care. There's got to be a part of you that sort of has to voluntarily be willing to go through this struggle. Then you get to that 20-day thing where they get kicked out, and all of a sudden you realize you're sort of scared straight, right? All of a sudden you're like, okay, if I'm gonna live, I'm gonna have to do this, right? This is
Yeah.
because I'm on an island, they kick me out. Where am I gonna go? Right? It's like so there's I don't know if you ever looked at this or ever went back and looked at it, but there's a whole series of things here that have happened in this entire thing you call a life, your
Mhm.
life,
Yeah.
right? That you couldn't write a script. There's no way that you could actually say before all this happened that this was going to happen this way,
No.
right?
Definitely.
So you make it through the 30 days of intensive outpatient, right?
Yep.
So you're now 44, 45 days into this thing.
Mhm.
What's the number one thing that you learned that was your takeaway from that experience, from being in that program?
Um, for one, just doing what you're told. Like that was it. And surrender. It's like these people have, 90%, right? 90% of people that work in treatment or obviously in the NA and AA meetings, they've already been through what you've been through.
Mhm.
And some of them their stories are far worse. And so my sponsor, one thing she told me was you sit down and you put your head down and you just do what you're told.
Mm-hmm.
Because they've already been there, they've been through it. And so if they've taken certain steps, it's just like success, right? Like if
Mm-hmm.
someone's successful, you do what they do, guess what? You're
Mm-hmm.
probably going to end up just like them.
Yeah.
And the same concept of like with sobriety is like, if you want to learn how to stay sober and you want to live a good life, just do what they tell you because they've already been there and this is what works. So learning to be humble was really hard because I had a big ego and I thought I was the tough girl. And, I grew up street fighting and like.
Mm-hmm. We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.